If you're new, we've been traveling through this book verse by verse, chapter by chapter, line by line. We've come to 7. This is the moment that a lot of you have been waiting for. It's the moment the pastors have not. We would have stopped right after chapter 6 and gone to a different book if it was up to us. Because if you are familiar with the book of Daniel, the first 6 chapters are pretty much historic narrative. So it's kind of storytelling. The second 6 chapters are apocalyptic. So you start getting just trippy stuff. And a lot of people have a lot of different opinions. When it comes to this, it's difficult stuff for anybody to try to walk through and teach with a closed fist, as if they know exactly what's being talked about. So I think there's things we can pull out of this, and we'll go ahead and let you know what those are. But there's a lot of things that are mystery, which is part of the reason why nobody's nailed down the exact events of how the end of the world is going to go. There's people on all ends of the spectrum. There's very different streams of thought when it comes to eschatology, which is just the study of last things. That's all it means, end time stuff. And so the way that people interpret these vague things, this symbolic language, should be something that's open-handed. And I think that's the first thing I want to start with before we actually move into this. Is there's two mistakes that Christians can make with apocalyptic texts and literature in the Bible. Number one is that you can make it everything, and number two is that you can make it nothing. And we don't want to sit in either of those extremes at the door. We want to be diligent with that which God has written down. In fact, the only book that actually promises a blessing at the beginning for reading it to the reader is the book of Revelation. On the other hand, some of the most brilliant theologians throughout church history that have written commentaries on every book throughout the entire canon of Scripture usually skipped 2, the end of Daniel and the book of Revelation. These are the smartest dudes. We don't want to ignore what God has put there, because He's put it there for a reason for us. But we are not to go home and have eschatology and charts and timelines and graphs and thinking that we can close our fist on every meaning of every detail of this imagery that we're seeing. Don't do that, okay? Hold it with an open hand. Look for Christ in it. Look for the promises of God in it. We'll get what we can. We'll leave the rest, all right? In other words, we're going to go ahead and try it. We're going to attempt the next 6 chapters. We're starting with the first one today. We got a lot of reading today. I'm going to try to go as fast as I can, and not only a lot of reading, but I'm going to have a lot of cross-referencing to a book that the men are very familiar with right now, the book of Revelation. I'm not going to stop and wait for you, and just for the sake of time. I don't mean to be mean. I want you to come with me, but I'm going to just be bouncing, like kind of moving. So you can always go back, listen to the sermon, or take notes on those texts. Go back to them later and take a look at them. Daniel chapter 7. Let's read verses 1 through 8. I'm going to try to get through verse 18. All right. At first, I was going to take the entire chapter because it's all kind of one apocalyptic narrative as far as this dream and the interpretation of this dream. There was no way. Like we would have been here till tomorrow. And so Brent's going to handle the second half. Verse 19 on, I'm gonna take the first 18. You're like, we'll get going then. Okay. In the first year of Belshazzar, king of Babylon, Daniel saw a dream and visions of his head as he lay in his bed, and then he wrote down the dream and he told the sum of the matter. Daniel declared, I saw in my vision by night, and behold, 4 winds of heaven were stirring up the great sea, and 4 beasts came up out of the sea, and one was different from another. The first was like a lion and had eagle's wings, and then as I looked, its wings were plucked off, and it was lifted up from the ground and made to stand on 2 feet like a man. The mind of a man was given to it. And behold, another beast, the second one like a bear. It was raised up on one side, and it had 3 ribs in its mouth between its teeth, and it was told, arise and devour much flesh. After this I looked, and behold, another like a leopard with 4 wings of a bird on its back, and the beast had 4 heads, and dominion was given to it. After this I saw in my night visions, and behold, a 4th, terrifying and dreadful and exceedingly strong, and it had great iron teeth, and it devoured, and it broke in pieces and stamped what was left with its feet. It was different from all the beasts that were before it, and it had 10 horns. I considered the horns, verse 8, and behold, there came up from among them another horn, a little one, before which 3 of the first horns were plucked up by the roots. And behold, in this horn were eyes like the eyes of a man, and a mouth speaking great things. Daniel runs in a weird way in that there tends to be parallel chapters in the book. So you have the fiery furnace, you have the lion's den, those parallel as far as what the narrative is and what the point is. We also have it apocalyptically between this chapter here in chapter 7 and chapter 2. If you remember back to chapter 2, Nebuchadnezzar was given a dream of a statue with different minerals, 4 different minerals as it goes down. This parallels it. If you can remember that, and again, we're not going to go there right now, but you can go back and look at that on your own. The only difference between the two is that was Nebuchadnezzar's dream. This is Daniel's dream. God gave chapter 2, that dream, to Nebuchadnezzar, and he's giving this one to Daniel. I'm going to go ahead and give you a spoiler. Same empires. Same empires, if you can remember that. And what's cool is that Daniel writes this down, if you notice, right at the beginning. He writes it down, if I can get there. I don't know what I'm doing. These pages are so thin in these new Bibles, like just cheap. He writes it down, he recalls it so that he can share it. I think it's cool that all these years later, we're sitting here looking at this dream that God gave to Daniel. And of course, it is in this dream that we start to really drift into apocalyptic descriptions, right? A lot of this is imagery. A lot of this is symbolism. If you don't remember that, you're going to get confused and you're probably going to come up with some really weird, odd, wrong stuff in your interpretation. Because what we tend to move towards is literalism when we read everything in the Bible, and it's not all meant to be taken literal. And we'll see some of the small tip-offs in the language itself, the way it's written, that will let us know that it's not supposed to be taken literal. But this symbolic language, because it's symbolic, we also need to float to other apocalyptic books, which I said we're going to be referencing the book of Revelation, to find common usages which will help us to determine what is what. We need to see how it's used in other places in the same type of genre of writing. And so we're going to do a bit of that, but we see it right off the bat here at the beginning of Daniel 7, verse 2. Daniel sees the 4 winds of heaven stirring up the great sea. And he's probably not talking about literal wind, like you and I would think of wind, or a literal sea, ocean, like you and I would think of a sea. How might we know that? Other apocalyptic parallels, like Revelation chapter 7, verse 1. After this, John says in 7:1 of Revelation, I saw 4 angels standing at the 4 corners of the earth, holding back the 4 winds of the earth, that no wind might blow on the earth or sea or against any tree. What's about to happen right there in Daniel 7? Kaka's about to hit the fan. God's about to pour out his wrath, okay? But what needs to happen before God starts to pour out his wrath on the nations and the human race is there are people that need to be marked off. In this case, in Daniel 7, it's this 144,000 Israelites that are marked off. That's why the wind is being held back. Is because these people, for whatever, they need to be taken care of before the wind starts blowing, right? So what might wind represent? Well, it represents trial, turmoil, like tension, a stirring, an unrest. Have you ever looked at a swimming pool when there's no wind? It looks pretty good, right? But we came from the desert, me and my wife, and the wind just never ceased to blow. It was horrible. And so there was always just ripples. There was always unrest. The surface of that water in my parents' swimming pool was never calm. And this is just the idea. And in Daniel's vision, what are these 4 winds stirring up? The Great Sea. And the Great Sea, if we look at parallel apocalyptic representations of it, are the nations. typically. It's referring to the nations. Again, Revelation 7, chapter 7, if we kept reading in that, we're not going to, supports this idea. And so does Daniel's dream here. It supports that idea because Daniel sees 4 beasts emerge from this great sea, right? That's where they come up out of. And if you cheated and you looked ahead to verse 17, guess who the 4 beasts are? None of you cheated? Seriously? They're kings. And kings don't come out of the ocean, right? They come out of the nations. That's where they come from, right? So we have these 4 kings, verse 17. We will get there at the end, who arise out of the earth. Thus, it's reasonable to interpret the sea or the great sea in apocalyptic texts as nations. It's a place where where humans occupy. Okay, so these 4 beasts pop up and they appear to Daniel like creatures that you would see out of a movie like Clash of the Titans. I remember when I was a kid, my parents had gotten, in the 80s, I'm dating my 80s, On TV had come out. Does anyone remember On TV? It was a little box that sat on your humongous TV, and it was kind of like our equivalent of HBO. You could get like movies on there. And I remember I would get home from school as early as I could before my parents did, so I could see what was on there. And there was this season, they would actually replay the whole movie, the newer movies, over and over again. And it was like this Clash of the Titans like marathon, like every day, over and over. And I was just like intrigued by these beasts. Like, who in the world like created these things for this movie? You know what I mean? And I can almost guarantee you that almost all of those things that we see in our movies came from people just looking at the Bible and going, that's a rad idea for a creature. You know what I mean? Like, they're just looking at all this imagery going like, that's nuts, let's do it. And that's what this reminds, like what Daniel's seeing, they look like hybrid monsters in a way. The first one, a lion with eagle's wings until the wings were removed. And I want you to notice there in verse 4, the first 2 words, was like. What does that tell you? It tells you that it wasn't this thing that I'm about to describe it as, but it's just the only way I know how to describe it. This is how we know that we don't walk into these things and take them literally, little words that tip us off, like was like, not is, okay? So we've got this first one, a lion with eagle's wings until the wings were removed. Who does this represent? If we remember back to chapter 2, this does parallel that. This is Babylon. Yeah, this is the Babylonian Empire. This is Nebuchadnezzar, okay? Who literally went from a beast, right, on all 4s in the field. And even his hair was so long, it was described there like it was like birds' feathers. Remember that? And then God takes him at the end of 7 years and stands him up on his feet, and reason returned to him. And this is what we have here, right? Number 1 is Nebuchadnezzar. It's that Babylonian Empire. Number 2, a bear with 3 ribs in its mouth. Hungry little bear, right? We learned in chapter 2, this is the Medo-Persian Empire. Guy named Cyrus, okay, who headed that up. 3 ribs in its mouth, most likely referring to the 3 biggest conquests that the Medo-Persian Empire had. Babylon, which is where Babylon went, Lydia, and Egypt. Those were the 3 main primary conquests of the Medo-Persian Empire that made them the dominating power during their time. Third, we have a leopard with 4 wings on its back and 4 heads. This would be, anybody? Greece, right? This would be Greece, who were known due to the swiftness in which they conquered the known world. Nothing faster. I think Alexander the Great's dad died when he was 20 years old. So when he was 20, he became king of Greece. By the time he was 25 or 26, he sat down in his chair, having conquered at 25, 26 years old, the entire known world. He sat down, he yawned, he was bored because there was nothing left to conquer in that short of time. That's how fast it happened, right? Almost as fast as a leopard with wings on it. You know what I mean? Like super quick. And then fourth, there's this 4th beast, more dreadful, more sinister, more powerful than the previous 3 that had iron teeth and 10 horns. Who is this? Roman Empire, right, which just happened to be the ruling, reigning, conquering empire of the time of Jesus' arrival. Jesus' arrival. And of course, this fourth beast sounds a lot like the beast of Revelation 13 that John sees rising out of the sea with 10 horns and 7 heads. And interestingly enough, if you look at that beast in Revelation chapter 13, the description of that beast that John sees there, it contains characteristics of all 4 of these beasts that Daniel describes, which is kind of weird. I don't know what to do with that. I just thought I'd throw it out there for you. So, however, with all of this imagery that Daniel is taking in and observing here with these beasts, it's really this little horn that catches Daniel's attention. It's this little horn that stands out because it came late. And it just seemed different in that it resembled more of that of a man. And it spoke great things. And because this little horn is so intriguing to Daniel, he will, and we will, be coming back to him later. That's really the second half of this chapter is primarily focused on this little horn. I praise God that I didn't get that and that Brent did. That's part of the reason why I didn't preach through the whole thing. I was like, I don't want to talk about that part. So Brent's going to have that next week. So if you don't agree with what he says about the little horn, go talk to him, So, all right, is this trippy enough so far, or is this like make enough sense so far? Hopefully. Okay, good. Let's read 9 through 11. We got to keep moving. As I looked, verse 9, thrones were placed, and the Ancient of Days took his seat. His clothing was white as snow, the hair of his head like pure wool. His throne was fiery flames, its wheels were burning fire. A stream of fire issued and came out from before him. 1,000 thousands served him, and 10,000 times 10,000 stood before him. And the court sat in judgment, and the books were opened. And I looked then because of the sound of the great words that the horn was speaking. And as I looked, the beast was killed, and its body destroyed and given over to be burned with fire. And as for the rest of the beasts, their dominion was taken away, but their lives were prolonged for a season and a time. So all of a sudden, Daniel's vision shifts abruptly from that which is happening on earth to that which is happening in heaven, right? And the first thing that he sees is that thrones are placed. And the question is, with a obviously implied answer, who sits on thrones? Kings do, right? And what do kings do? They rule, right? So first we're looking at, again, if we cheat to 17, kings here on earth, and then we're looking at kings that transcend, or thrones that transcend those kings that are on earth. So we have these kings on earth, 17, contrasted with these divine kings, these kings in heaven. Of course, one king is one that he zeroes in on and talks about, grabs all of his attention. But I do want to say that if you can start to grab hold of this theme of kings on earth, kings in heaven, right, then you're actually going to start to really just see the intended purpose of the narrative, why God's given this to Daniel, like the point of what this is. Because it's so easy, like I said when we started, for us to look at passages like this and get caught up in the small things, the symbolism, the trippy stuff, the mysterious stuff. It can actually steal all of our attention, and we can miss the big thing. And this is the big thing, all right? So we're going to run on these rails. And so Daniel sees one that he calls the Ancient of Days take his seat. And based on the title, who is this? It's the Lord, it's Jehovah, it's Yahweh, it's the voice of the burning bush, however you want to say it. I think it's not easily mistaken. It is interesting. I think this title's rad. This isn't something that you see all over. This is something unique to Daniel, to call him the Ancient of Days, right? That just sounds heavy. That sounds pretty heavy. But my question is, how did Daniel know it was the Ancient of Days? This is what my head does, because I'm extremely base. And so when I read something like this, I'm like, how did he know that? You know what I mean? And did he have a name tag, or, did it have a plaque on the back of his throne when he sat down that said the Ancient of Days? You know what I mean? But I can't help but to think that just once you see him, once you encounter him, he's unmistakable. He's unmistakable. I know that in my life. When I've seen him in my life work, and I've heard my dad's voice, and I've had my experiences with the Ancient of Days. It's unmistakable who it is. And Daniel knows, like, he's just so unique. The Ancient of Days is so unique. He's so unlike anything or anyone else that we've ever known or encountered that you just can't mistake him. You know what I mean? We do know that the implications of this title, the Ancient of Days, is one that would be likened to one who has always been, right? Like the pre-existent one, like the one with no beginning. The one who transcends all kings and all kingdoms and all empires that ever were or ever will be, including these 4 that Daniel is now being shown. And in verses 9 and 10, Daniel gives us a brief description of the Ancient of Days, of him who sits on the throne, which just happens to sound an awful lot like the description others have given the Lord, including John in his Revelation. Chapter 1, remember, he hears a voice behind him. He turns to see who the voice is, and he says, I saw one like the Son of Man, clothed with a long robe and with a golden sash around his chest, and the hairs of his head were white, like the white wool, like snow. And his eyes were like a flame of fire, and his feet were like burnished bronze, refined in a furnace, and his voice was like the roar of many waters. It sounds familiar. It sounds like the same description. It sounds like the same one that Daniel's looking at. And my thought is, like, how do you look at something like that and live? You know what I mean? like how do you look at something like that and live? I saw Indiana Jones when I was a kid. It traumatized me. When faces melt, you know, I can't believe that was PG back in the day. I still can't believe that was PG. You know what I mean? But I don't know how you look at something like that and live, you know. John did. Daniel's getting this glimpse of this right now. And of course, what does wool represent in the Bible? What does snow? What does white represent in the Bible? Is righteousness. Just complete, utter, unblemished, perfect righteousness, right? That they're seeing in this one who sits on the throne. Now, most kings have a decent-sized cabinet around them, right? Like a contingent of people that they put around them to serve them and to perform various acts of service to meet their needs. But the Ancient of Days has an active army, right? Like, this is an army. So, like, I was watching this, I don't even know how I came across it. It had to do with the White House and when you actually transfer administrations, what they do to Oval Office, which is actually ridiculous. Like, they actually pull the floor out, they strip the paint down, they pull the molding off, and you can imagine reasons why, but I had no idea that it was that extensive of a makeover when the new administration came in. But the other thing that I found out is that there's a White House chief usher. And that chief usher is there to get the list from the incoming administration, down to the details of what kind of toothpaste they want stocked, what kind of toilet paper they want stocked, what kind of light bulbs they want put in their light. Like, everything comes to this chief usher, and then this chief usher has a team of about 100 little cronies underneath them that actually makes it all happen, right? So this is for the most powerful, we would say, person on earth. The President of the United States, maybe 100, maybe 101 people that tend to. This is thousands, 1,000 thousands. You know how much that is? It's a lot. Yeah, I don't know what it is in the Hebrew, or actually we're still in Aramaic, by the way. So we don't get back to Hebrew from Aramaic, by the way, until verse 28 of this chapter. But I don't know what 1,000 thousands is in Aramaic. It's a big number, right? And not only are his team of servants vast in number, but then the amount of those in attendance. I mean, come on, you know? Like the amount of people that are before him for this event right now. Our capacity in this room is 299. I didn't know we could get that many in here. That would be tight. 299 can sit in here in a worship service before the Ancient of Days. But in that room, in that place, there is no limit when it comes to capacity, right? Which is, I mean, what if a fire breaks out? You know what I mean? Seriously? Because like a stream of fire like proceeds. All right. I thought it was funny in my head. I really did. Really did. That's why I'm not the joke guy. I'm the yell guy. okay? I just don't know how to do it. So, and the court, so we got a court here. The court sat in what? The court sat in judgment, and the books were open. So here's what we can assume with what's about to go down, with what Daniel's looking at, a trial. A trial is about to happen. And if we know that a trial is about to take place, it makes all the more interesting to consider who might be found sitting on the other thrones. And this is a total sideline issue. It doesn't matter. We're really not going to get into it. But if you go to Revelation chapter 4, might hint at it, okay? So 24 elders, 12 represent the 12 tribes of Israel, 12 the apostles, right? Revelation chapter 4. Possible. It's possible, okay? But the big question is, what are the books, right? I mean, if you think like me, like, what's in the books? You know, what's like what do they say? And I think it could be safe for us to guess based on Revelation 20, a good possibility of what might be there. It says this, starting in verse 11. John says this in Revelation 20. Then I saw a great white throne, and him who was seated on it. From his presence, earth and sky fled away, and no place was found for them. And I saw the dead, great and small, standing before the throne, and books were opened. And then another book was opened, which is the book of life. The book of life. And the dead were judged by what was written in the books. Books, according to what they had done. So one of the books present, good chance we might assume to be the book of life, that which contains the names of the redeemed. Let's just simplify it for the sake of time, okay? The others then, we might assume to be the book of works, that which incriminates all those possibly that aren't in the book of life. That's a total speculation. I get it. Something to think about, okay? As much as it would be fun to dig into the books, it's got to wait. It's got to wait. So court's in session, the evidence is presented, books, records are opened, which sounds like what we have come to know as what I just read, the great white throne judgment. And Daniel gets a peek, right, into this divine throne room event. But as he is peeking into this heavenly courtroom, his attention's turned back to this little horn. Like, he just can't get this dude out of his mind, right? And it's drawn there due to, apparently, the fact that he's noisy and annoying and loud. Like, the dude just says a lot, you know? It seems he's creating quite a stir and making quite an impact with that which is coming out of him, with that which he is saying. And yet, as he observes the little horn, he sees the fourth beast, which the little horn proceeded from, get destroyed and scorched. When? Don't know. How? Don't know. We'll leave that for another time, okay? As for the other three beasts, verse 12 tells us what happens. And basically nothing special happens there, right? They eventually burn out and fade away. The numbers and the numerology of a season at a time, quote, unquote, that you see there, probably doesn't have any special hidden significance, you know what I mean? Like it's a song by the birds, you know what I mean? Again, I'm just going to stop making jokes. All right, Ecclesiastes 3:1, to everyone there is a season and a time for every purpose under heaven. That's what Solomon says in Ecclesiastes 3:1. In other words, a season and a time simply means for a certain season and at a certain time. Was Babylon around and reigning? Was Cyrus around and reigning? Was Alexander around and reigning? For a certain season, certain time. That's it. Okay, final section. We ready? Home stretch. We're going to go 11. No, we're not. We're going to go, 13? 13 to 18. And I saw in the night visions, and behold, with the clouds of heaven, there came one like the Son of Man, and he came to the Ancient of Days and was presented before him. And to him was given dominion and glory and a kingdom, that all people, nations, languages should serve him. His dominion's an everlasting dominion, which shall not pass away, and his kingdom one that shall not be destroyed. As for me, Daniel, my spirit within me was anxious, and the visions of my head alarmed me. And I approached one of those who stood there and asked him the truth concerning all of this. So he told me and made known to me the interpretation of the things. These four great beasts are four kings who shall arise out of the earth, but the saints of the Most High shall receive the kingdom and possess the kingdom forever, forever, and ever. First, Daniel introduces us to the Ancient of Days. Now he introduces us to the Cloud Rider. Let's just call him the Cloud Rider. I kind of like that, has a ring to it, you know? The Cloud Rider. And who is the Cloud Rider? It's Jesus. It's Jesus. And what's interesting is that Daniel sees him, the Cloud Rider, coming to the Ancient of Days. And here I go again with the way that my brain works when I read these things. I'm thinking if Jesus is coming to the Father, to the Ancient of Days, where's he coming from? Where's he been? What's he been up to, right? And I'm glad you asked. Revelation 5. Let me just start reading some of this. We'll stop. I think I'll get the point as we start getting through this. Listen to this. Revelation 5, we have, of course, John at this point looking at the throne room of God himself. He's having a vision of the throne room of God, kind of like what Daniel's doing here. He says, and I saw in the right hand of him who was seated on the throne a scroll. You know what scrolls were typically used for back then, especially ones that were bound, that were locked. He had a scroll written within and on the back, sealed with 7 seals, and I saw a mighty angel proclaiming with a loud voice, who's worthy to open the scroll and break the seals. And no one in heaven and no one on earth or under the earth was able to open the scroll or look into it, and I began to weep. John says, I began to weep loudly because no one could go and take this out of his hand and open it. Right? No one was found worthy to open the scroll and look into it. And one of the elders said to me, it's cool, man. It's cool, like, stop crying. Like, weep no more, because the Lion of the tribe of Judah, the root of David, has conquered so that he can open the scroll and its 7 seals. And between the throne, the 4 living creatures, and among the elders, I saw a lamb standing as though it had been slain, with 7 horns and with 7 eyes, which are the 7 spirits of God sent out into all the earth. And when he took the scroll from the right hand of him who was seated on the throne, the 4 living creatures and the 24 elders fell down before the Lamb, each holding a harp and golden bowls of incense, which are the prayers of the saints. And they sang a new song, saying, worthy are you to take the scroll and to open its seals. And here's why. Here's where I believe Jesus, the Ancient of Days, or the Cloud Rider, was coming from. For you were slain, and by your blood you ransomed people for God from every tribe and language and people and nation. And you have made them a kingdom and priests to our God, and they shall reign on the earth forever and ever. He most likely is coming from purchasing the rights to that title deed that the Ancient of Days is holding, that no one's worthy to take because no one's able to purchase it. It's just too much. But there is one. And that allows John to dry his eyes when he sees that lamb that is slain walk up and take that title deed out of the arms of the Ancient of Days, because he ransomed himself. It's so interesting that he's actually seen in the throne room in a slain state. That's wild. You know, we're going to see him one day in the full glory of who he is and who he's always been. But you know what actually might be more ridiculously glorifying about Christ is seeing God, the Son, in a slain state. I mean, that's like, I feel like my head's going to explode if that happens. You know what I mean? That's just a whole nother level of glory, you know? The state that he was in as a result of purchasing me and purchasing you and redeeming the world. You know, what he went through, what it cost him to take the title deed out of the hand of the Ancient of Days. You know, crazy stuff. What is it that John the Baptist says? How does he introduce him to the public when he sees him coming to be baptized? Behold, the Lamb of God that takes away the sins of the world. And so our victor is a lamb. And he's seen here in that state, right? With that identity. It's just wild, the one who's worthy to take the scroll. And what's the plain implication, declaration of verse 14, right? Where we've got, and to him was given, you know, Daniel says, to him was given dominion, glory, kingdom, all people, nation, languages to serve him. His dominions and everlasting dominion, which shall not pass away. His kingdom, one that shall not be. I mean, what's basically being said here, right? Like, behold the King of Kings. Like, you've been seeing these kings over here that are big and nasty and scary and powerful, and they've come and they're gonna come, right? But behold, the King of Kings, the King over all them, the ultimate King of the ultimate kingdom. In other words, like, forget these four beasts, right? Like, I introduced to you the King of Kings. And at this point, how bad do you think Daniel needed to hear this, right? How bad do you think he needed to see and hear and know what it is that he's being shown here in the cloud rider? Because don't forget, his and his people's current context and current circumstance, which is easy to do as we start getting into all this imagery and symbolism, which is that they are enslaved. They are in captivity. They are exiles right here, ruled by the beasts, one of the beasts of the current ruling kingdoms. And in a sense, what this is it's a voice saying, hey, Daniel, it's bleak right now for you and your people, but it won't always be. It won't always be. Right? And so Daniel's anxious and he's stirred and he's perplexed. He's alarmed on multiple levels and he's ready to hear what it means, you know? And he gets that in 15 through 18. But it is in verse 18 that you, I, Daniel, receive the entirety of what it is that we are to see and what we are to grab onto and what we are to take away from this whole thing. The premier takeaway can be summed up in two words. God wins. I mean, I just had chills run down just saying it. You know what I mean? Not because I said it. I mean, God wins. I need to know this. You need to know this. The people of God need to know this. God wins. This is we as your pastors, like sometimes like I think we continually attempt at times to discourage you guys from giving yourselves over to the current political moment. This is why. It's because God wins. God wins. We want to discourage you from getting overly caught up in the current earthly kings and kingdoms that exist and that rise and that fall, whether they're really bad or less bad. We need to know that God wins. God wins. This is something I need to know in my life regularly because I am not exempt from going through hard times and hard seasons just like the rest of you. And as I've said before, I'm coming out of a recent one. And this week's even been a challenging week. Like there was a point where my emotions this week, not because of one thing, but because of multiple heavy things that all hit at once. You know what I mean? God will never give you more than you can handle. It happens all the time. That's not biblical. He does it all the time, and he does it so that we will absolutely fall on him, like throw ourselves on him, so that then we would know that his grace is sufficient for us. Like that's the bigger thing, right? 2 Corinthians chapter 11. And so like this week, I had come to a point with so many heavy things that I kind of went numb with my emotions, which actually scared me even more. Like just numb. I didn't even know what I was feeling. And in that, I kind of didn't care. And that's what really scared me. And guess what kept me going? God wins. God wins. We need to know what the end of the story is. And this is the raddest thing as Christians, as the church, the saints of God, is that we do. Like we have the spoiler alert. And it's all good. In fact, it's very good. Sometimes it feels wrong, looks wrong, and it just seems like everything the opposite of what we read, but I guarantee you, already God won. And because God won, so does his people. We've won too, right? We've won too. I watch hockey, again, because I'm weird, and my team doesn't come on till late because they're West Coast, and I'm old now. I just, the thing I look forward to from the time I get up in the morning is going to bed again that night. Bed is so rad, and then our bed is so comfortable. It's incredible. And I'm a Kings guy, grew up in LA during the Gretzky years, and I'm a Kings guy. They don't start till 7:30, and that's okay. I don't go to bed that early, but it's getting there. Those things last 3 hours, and so there's times I can't stay up till the end, guys. Okay, I'm so glad I shared this. So I get up in the morning, and I'll go to my phone, and I'll pull up the app, and I'll look at the score. And it'll say Kings won, 5-4 or whatever. And I'll go, cool, I'm going to go watch the highlights. And I'll pull up the highlights. And it's bad sometimes. This other team is just, they'll be up 4-0. And they'll be like, I think I looked at the wrong thing. Everything about this game and how this game unfolded looks wrong. But they won. They won. The Christian life can feel like that sometimes, guys. We need to know that God's won. That the end of we already know the end of the story. It's not a surprise. We know the end of the story, and you know what? It ends very well for those who are Christ's. It ends very well. Cling to this eschatology. God wins. Okay? Yeah, it's okay to dabble and dig a little deeper and go farther with it, but don't let this be compromised. God wins. Lay hold of this story. God wins. The end. Lay your head on this pillow, because it is a pillow to lay your head on. God wins. The end. And as we see here clearly, when did he win? This is where a lot of people get on different sides of the fence with their eschatology. When did God win, according to what we read here in Daniel Day? Right? When were the beasts conquered? When was it all solidified? A long time ago on a cross. A long time ago with an empty tomb. Right? God won. Right? His winning does not begin when Jesus returns. It just culminates there. Right? It began when he hung on the cross for the sins of the world, vacated the tomb and death, ascended to the right hand of the Ancient of Days, and put Satan to an open shame. See, Jesus with his first coming was the first and final blow. Final blow. When he came and purchased the title deed with his blood and with his body and with his sinless life for you and I. And if you can make this connection, it will inform rightly how you divide the bulk of your eschatology and interpret your apocalyptic passages. The battle is won, God wins, the people of God win, and if you want the sum total of what God intended Daniel to take away from this vision and all the craziness of the imagery, it is that he's won. That he's won. Now, I don't want to close without saying this. We all, each, are going to have a day in court, and books are going to be opened. And I know that my name's going to be in one and not the others because of the cloud rider for me. For me. And I don't want anyone to leave here today without settling this, because it's the only chance you have. When you stand before the Ancient of Days, at the end of days, if you don't have an attorney, you're like, it's over. It's over. You need the Lamb of God, the one who holds the title deed, to be standing on your right side for you, or you have nothing. All right? By faith, I will walk out of that courtroom to the right and not to the left because of faith in the work of Christ for me. It's all I have. My rap sheet is so much worse than I even think it is. You know what I mean? Because God doesn't miss things. It's going to be so much longer when he pulls it out than any of us think it is. There's no way we can stand up underneath it. We can't stand up underneath it. So praise God that the Cloud Rider paid for every bit of it. I have no rap sheet anymore. It was nailed to a cross, right? And if your only hope is Christ, by faith in what he's done, yours is too. And so God wins and the people of God win. And I know that because of what we're about to do. This is why we come to the table. It's a reminder constantly of the Christus Victor, the victory of Christ on my behalf and on your behalf and on the world's behalf, right? In his own blood, with his own body, by faith. If you believe that, come, right? If you don't, believe it and come. It's not going to, the courtroom's going to be gnarly. All right. Lord, we thank you for allowing Daniel to preserve this dream that obviously is not just for him. It's for us. And oh, how we need it, especially with moments like this. We need it. We need to know that you have secured and finished everything necessary for the battle to be won. And so we say, come now. I mean, even as we come to the table, part of what it preaches is not just what you've already done, but that we get to do this with you one day soon. And so we do just cry out in our hearts, Maranatha, come quickly. We long to see you face to face, to be with you, to have everything that we're challenged with and struggled with dead and buried once for all because of what you've accomplished. And so we thank you and we acknowledge, we claim, we know that you are our only hope. Apart from you, we're in trouble. So thank you for doing what you did. Thank you for seeing us. Thank you for seeing people like us. Thank you for having a heart for sinners. And it's in your name that we give praise and thanks. Amen.